at the Liverpool service. This is a poem that was read out by Andy Wilkinson. Andy is a very good friend of Andy, and it was a privilege that Ness has asked me to read this as well. Before I do that, I just want to relate one story, and it's how did I get to know Andy Jackson. I arrived in March of 1989. Andy Wilkinson had put me on a real yucky flight from Brussels through Yugoslavia, Belgrade. 24 hours later, he picked me up at Dubai airport, and after a few beers, he says, I've got to go into the office. It was Ramadan. I don't know what we were doing, drinking beers in Ramadan. He said, but here's a few beers. But by the way, I've organized a game of squash at 2 o'clock with Andy Jackson. And I said, who's Andy Jackson? He says, don't worry about it. He's a small guy. You'll be fine. So I turned up to the game. A little bit tired, of course. But I beat him. And Andy never forgot that. So we played 198 times subsequently, and I only lost 8 times. In those 8 times was the time that my son was in hospital. He called me when he was in ICU and said, let's play squash. I thought he was taking an opportunity, which he was, to take advantage of me when I was at a low ebb. He beat me 8 times on the trot over 3 weeks. The last time I saw Andy Jackson, he reminded me of those 8 victories, not of the 199 losses. This was the Andy Jackson I knew and loved. He took the time and he took the effort to think about other people. The poem that Andy and those who were at the funeral, he gave a little bit of a background on John Gillespie McGee. I did a little bit of research on it as well, and I just say a couple of points where I see a small similarity between 2 people that were cut short, even at 51 in the prime of his life. John Gillespie McGee was the son of missionary parents born in China. He was educated in Nanking. He was educated in Rugby in England, and then went to Pennsylvania in the United States. He earned a scholarship to go to Yale University. However, rather than take up the scholarship, at the outbreak of war, he elected to join the Royal Canadian Air Force because the Americans were not at war. He was then posted to England in June of 1941, and he joined a squadron 412, with the motto in Latin is Promptus ad Vindictum, and anyone who's had a tongue lashing from Andy Jackson will know that this means swift to avenge. John Gillespie McGee was killed in a plane accident in 1941 in December at the age of 19. Another poem written by him is Per Agua, and this is the first 2 letters of the Royal Air Force, Per Agua ad Astra, through adversity to the stars, and this was Andy Jackson. Rob took a lot of my wind out of my sails because he covered all the things that he did. A couple of the things: Land End to John O'Groats in 7 days, all the skiing, Kilimanjaro, Everest. He worked for charities, his beloved Barrel House. But for me, first and foremost, of course, he was a son, he was a husband, a father, and to all of us, a very, very good friend. I'd like to read the poem. Oh, how I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter silvered wings. Sunward I have climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheeled, and soared and swung in high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up, the long delirious burning blue, I've topped the wind, swept heights with easy grace where never a lark or eagle flew, and while with silent lifting mind I trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, I put out my hand and touched the face of God. Andy Jackson, never to be forgotten. Thank you.